All right, so the program on 32, there's one little piece there that I think you should kind of have a better grip on before you try to either type it here or just, I don't know. It's more of a looping thing, but it does bring us into an interesting world here. You haven't, the only iteration that you've actually seen so far is the while something's true loop, right? So you've seen the while, and that was a few videos ago. But now there's this other thing here, a for loop. And it's actually using something called range. So there's some pieces here that you haven't actually seen yet. And so let's see what these things are actually all about to help you better understand what's going on here in this program. So what I did is I did go ahead and let's clear the idle, and let's take my little program. So I saved the initial program as temp1. I'm going to save this one now as temp2. They're both going to be in the discussion or the content section. But this one is back to being very simple. Ask what the amount is. We got a fever temp and then the Boolean, right? There's no concept of the beeping. I took the beeping out. Okay, the beeping was me sort of introducing you to the idea of bringing in a module. Now, I've said before that input is kind of a built-in function. And so you took my word for it because, of course, this is kind of a one-sided deal here. But Grant, there's got to be documentation on this. Now, there certainly is. You could do a Google search on Python input and you'd get information. In fact, let's do that now. Yep. So input and W3 schools is where it went right away, but I'm actually going to go right here to the actual internal documentation. Oh, well, that's even more. But anyway, let's go down here, and input was what I wanted to look at. So let's find input, go. So there's a nice little sort of quick discussion on input. All right, but and I even said also that print was one too. And so there's print. Right, so those are like built-in functions. Now I found those by going straight to the documentation library of Python. All right. Also in W3 schools, once you understand the certain keywords to look for, there is a whole section here on where are we now, on built-in functions, which I guess I can't find. Right there, built-in functions. Boom. And it's going to be similar to the documentation we just saw, because, for example, I bet you I'll find print pretty easily. There's print, and it's got some examples of how to try out print. And then if I go back and I go to input, it's going to have some examples on input. I would strongly encourage you guys to spend some time in here just sort of screwing around with these two built-in functions and get a better feel and learn it better than even me. There's actually, prints can get even more complicated than just this. And you can learn this stuff from going to the documentation. A huge part of your fundamentals of programming is to understand that you don't get a lot from just watching videos. In many cases, by the way, it's a lot like trying to learn chess by watching videos. You need to play, you need to make some mistakes, and you need to read the documentation. So there's documentation here, and this is pretty easy stuff to read. When I was learning stuff in school, all I had was the textbook, right? Because I was learning all this stuff pre-internet. All I had was a textbook, and the only way I could practice this stuff would be in the school on the computer. You guys have the entire freaking internet, and you can do all this stuff on a browser. So you should be able to pick up stuff very, very nicely. No judgment here. All right, so okay, so why am I bringing that up? Well, I'm bringing this up because range is actually a function. Range is actually a function. And then to understand range, we need to take a step back and say, well, what the heck is this for thing about, Grant? What is that for thing about? And I think you can find that pretty easily right there. Python for loops. The only problem is, as I'm recognizing this, you know what? You're not ready for that yet. So let's forget that. Let's just go back over here and see how they did this. They basically said for something is in a range. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a nice simple program first where we're going to demonstrate this. So we're going to go new, and let's just try for something is in a range of 1 to 10. We're hard coding that. And we're going to go print something. Right? Don't get lost trying to figure out a program by trying to run the whole thing. See if you can get away with running pieces of it. Let's just call it temp again. All right, now you didn't see what happened there, but this is what it did. So something is a variable that's created and it's assigned 1, and then it's printed. And then it goes through and increments by 1 to get to 2, increments by 1 to get to 3, increments by 1 to get to so on until basically it stops short of printing 10, right? So a common strategy, by the way, if you want something to be 1 to 10, is to either, well, is to do that. Basically, this will get you your 1 to 10, right? And I think it's good enough for now. Basically, make this thing the maximum plus 1. That would be kind of a common strategy there. So I might be tempted to look up range in my built-in functions to get a better idea. There it is. But it says create right there, actually right there. This is a great example, right? And let's try that one right there, range. So what this did is I put in 6, and it basically started at 0 and went through 5. So the difference between this and my fairly simple program is that I put in 2 arguments, it's called. So this is a function, and these are the arguments. I also say the word parameters, and it kind of almost means the same thing at your level. But anyway, so these are the 2 arguments. And so this program's only using 1 argument, which kind of implies that by default, it's going to assume you're going to start with 0. So if I basically went ahead and went 0, comma, and I went run, what this will do is it should give me the same output. And it does, right? So if it's only going to get one thing, it assumes the first thing is 0. That's one thing for you to sort of appreciate for range. You can't just print the range, by the way. It basically is going to be used in a for loop, at least to my knowledge. That's where it's going to be used. That's where I've used it anyway. All right, so now we know what this thing does. So sometimes, by the way, instead of something, I would call this thing a counter. Go counter, counter, and that's basically your basic for loop with a range, right? Now, let's use this now in that little temperature program. In this temperature program, rather than have the user put in a start, what I want to do is I want the Fahrenheit to be a value that goes from Fahrenheit's 0 to Fahrenheit's 100, we'll say. Okay, so in this case, Fahrenheit, I'm just going to basically make it 0.0. I'm taking away the input because I'm going to control the input through a loop. And then I'm going to go into the loop and the processing. And sadly, we're going to start seeing a little bit of a shift here. All right, because what's going to happen here is I want my printing to happen in the loop. But I'm going to say for the Fahrenheit is in the range of 0 through 100. And now this I want to happen, that I want to happen there, that I want to happen there. I want there to be a print statement. If they actually have a fever, print they have a fever. And we probably will never see that. All right, let's run it. All right, so you didn't get to see the excitement of it running, but it did basically start off at 0, and it went through and started accumulating, and we never did see the actual fever part. All right. So, you know, if you can handle it, just give me 1 second here. I am going to create a condition here. I'm going to create a variable, which I'm going to call fever text. So it's going to be a string fever text, which is going to be assigned nothing. And what I'm going to do here is after this print statement, I'm going to go plus string fever text. Okay. And then this if statement is going to get removed. Actually, I'm going to put right there, copy. I'm going to copy that into my clipboard first, move that out. And if they have a fever, the Boolean is true, and the stir fever text is going to be assigned, you have a fever. All right. And let's use a little bit of coolness here. We're going to go /t to indicate that that is a tab. All right. So again, I won't see any difference in the results, but let's just run it, and off it goes. Awesome. What I might want to do now is go and make this thing, let's say 110. And I do want it to be 110, so I'm going to add 1 right there. Right, 110 plus 1. I'm going to go run, go. And now my you have a fevers are starting to show up, which is pretty cool. The other thing we'll do is those are magic numbers just showing up. Now, this is a calculation. I'll leave that alone, but these numbers, I don't want to do those numbers. What I want to do is I want to have a min. So I'm going to go and I'll keep them as integers. Int min val is going to be assigned 0, and int max val is going to be assigned 100. And then I'm going to replace the 0 here with min val. I'm going to replace the 100 with max val and run that. And that's working great. And one final thing, I don't actually need this variable. Now, here's the strategy. When you're not sure if you need something or not, don't just delete it, comment it out first to see whether the program will still run. I'm going to run it, and it's behaving exactly the same way, which is awesome. So I don't need that. I'm going to get rid of it. And then rather than make these things 0 and 100, I'm going to make it an integer input. What is it Celsius with Fahrenheit, right? What F do you want to start with? Close. And int. I suppose I could make that float, but you know what? I'm going to assume that nobody's going to put like 0.5s in there. What F do you want to end with? Close. We run it. Looks good. I want to start with 0. I want to go to 100. Start with the stuff that you know. Make sure that it still works. And then start with the stuff that you don't know. And here's a neat one for us. By the way, what are we here? I'm going to start with -40. And we're going to go to 140, we'll say. Now, this is going to be longer. But what's interesting to me, and what should be interesting to you guys, especially if you come from a country that doesn't use Fahrenheit, I always thought this was interesting, that -40 Fahrenheit is actually equal to -40 Celsius. Little extra learning there. But anyway, so that's a pretty neat loop. That's a pretty neat loop. So I would totally then, if I were you, I would study this loop. I would screw around with this loop. I think you should be able to, this is where I'm going to blow it. I'm going to try and copy this thing and put it in my fabulous visualizer, because I see, good deal. Let's go paste, let's go run. And it's got the infinite loop problem again. All right, whatever, man. Yeah, you know, that's just one more. This notepad, paste, copy, paste. No, it totally won't. I'm not sure. Oh, probably should have stopped the video before that, but whatever. You know, by now, you know, I'll just go ahead and experiment with stuff. Anyway, so this program here is a pretty good program for you to look at. I will also save that. And so now what's coming after this is the dreaded assignment.